All right, Penn State fans, Bob Flounders joined by Max Ralph. It is first of all, happy Thanksgiving. We're recording this a little bit earlier in the week just because people have travel plans and usually we record it, Max. Max, we record our Penn State preview. It's Maryland this week. We usually record it on Thursday morning. Now, we are committed to the Penn State cause for PennLive, but it's
Right.
tough to it's tough to do it on a holiday, and B, if we put it up on Thursday morning, I think people are going to be like, yeah, I think I'm going to pass on that, and maybe I'll watch it Friday. But doing it now, we'll have it up early. You guys can enjoy it and still have all day, Penn State fans, to enjoy NFL football, college football, turkey, all the good stuff. So here we are, Max.
Yep.
I know you had safe travels. You were on a little bit of a trip recently, but you're back. We're gonna be at Beaver Stadium on Saturday, 3:30 kick. Penn State, 10-1 Penn State, 5-0 on the road. Penn State. I don't want to say it's a breather because that's not quite what this is, but Maryland has got so many issues, and it's really been a lost season for the Terps. They only have one Big Ten win, Max. I know you knew that. And it was against USC, and they barely got it, or they'd be like Purdue, right? Winless in the Big Ten. They're not a good road team. Penn State's, I think, opened as a 24-point favorite. It's senior day. All the intangibles, man, are lining up for James Franklin's program, but they still got to play the game. What is on your mind as we get set to discuss this game? Try not to look ahead too far into December, but what are your thoughts on kind of what you've seen from Penn State? 2 weeks on the road is not easy, even if you have to go to Purdue, which is pretty easy. But I mean, the Minnesota game, they were really tested. What's on your mind?
I don't know, Bob. A lot of stuff's on my mind about this team. I think the bottom line is you got to be really impressed by what they did in those back-to-back road games.
Yeah.
Obviously, as you alluded to, I was not at those games. You and Johnny handled that stuff, but just watching them on TV, Purdue kind of went how we all expected. They crushed them, should have. Minnesota was a little bit more of a hiccup than I think anyone expected. I mean, you and I talked about it in our podcast last week.
Yeah.
That's a good Minnesota team. We knew that going in. We just thought Penn State might have played a little bit better than they did. But you still have to give them a lot of credit. The fact that they still pulled it out.
Yeah.
You got to give credit to James Franklin for the fake punt, for the fourth down decisions. Sure. You got to give credit to Drew Aller for being 5 of his last 6 passing in huge spots. The defense over and over again. I've started pulling out. I'm sure you've seen it, Bob. I've started pulling out on PennLive some stats from the game that kind of intrigue me, and just the second half run defense continues to be just incredible. I mean, Minnesota was gashing them in the first half, and then they only allowed just over 2 yards a carry in the second half, I think. Or actually, it was 2 yards a carry in the third quarter, and then it ended up being 1.5 for the entire second half. So the stuff that Tom Allen and his group are doing right now are really keeping Penn State's offense afloat when things don't go right offensively. Sure. And more times than not, really outside of the Ohio State game, things have gone well for the offense. So I think this is a dangerous team. When you look ahead to Maryland, I mean, you don't want to say breather. You're right, Bob, because it's Big Ten competition, and anything can happen any given week. I think USC is a much better team than Maryland is, and still got beat. But hey, I think it's almost a breather. Let's just. It's a
near breather. It's a near
breather. Penn State's a dangerous team. Maryland is not. They got a lot of issues, like you said. Impressed with what the Nittany Lions have done so far, and I think it'll be a good senior day for a lot of guys who deserve it.
Yeah. The Minnesota game, Max. You touched on it. One of the couple of the thoughts that are still bouncing around in my gigantic skull. It's not as big as Mark Brennan's skull, guys. Penn State fans, if you know who Mark Brennan, I think you do. No one's got a bigger head than Brennan, but I'm I'm probably a close second. But anyway, I have a lot of things bouncing around in there about Minnesota. And what I would say is, that was really their championship game. That was
Mhm.
Minnesota. They're 6-4. They're going to go to a bowl game. They could have been 7-4. That they win that game, and their season is made. They pulled out all the stops. It was a max effort game from their offense, which is ready to go right away. Probably
Mhm.
a script, right, that worked, and they gashed them. And their
Mhm.
defense played hard. Like
Yeah,
they matched Penn State, body blow for body blow. That Shippensburg kid, Anthony Smith, man,
he's good.
I don't know what the recruiting story was. I don't know, but if I'm James Franklin, I would have never let that kid get out of Pennsylvania. He's a terror. Like he is really, really good, and he
Yeah.
is a big athlete. And Zane Durant couldn't have been more impressed with those guys. But when we talked last week about the Minnesota game, I know we're going to get to Maryland, but we said there was kind of like it was kind of a narrow path for Minnesota to kind of stay with Penn State. And I think we talked about it, but if Penn State didn't play a clean game, they're going to have trouble against this team.
Yeah,
And the special teams issues that they sprung leaks, the
they
two
did.
block kicks, a wacky play for a 2-point return, right? The that punt from the end zone where they spread out in that formation and he took too many steps and it got partially blocked to create a short field. Other than that first drive, that touchdown drive, Penn State's defense played really, really well. They did adjust, but
Mhm.
there was a lot of things that Penn State had to fix in game to even have a shot at the end, and they did. A credit to their players. I think a credit to James Franklin and his staff. They didn't play well early, but on the road, a little bit dragging after 2 games on the road against a team that wanted this game very badly to find a way to win. It is a feather in James Franklin's cap. It's a feather in the players' caps. But the third down issues bug me. They had him against Ohio State the last 2 years. They had him today. They had him, and they were saved by their fourth down play. The
Mhm.
kicking game, I think, will get cleaned up. But
Mhm.
I think when you look back on this game and how they won it, in terms of quality wins this season, it has to be right near, even though it wasn't pretty, it has to be right near the tippy top because this was a grueling battle, and they found a way to get it done on the road.
Yeah, I put a tweet out about it that kind of got some big traction. Just like Johnny and I complained last week's podcast about the way ESPN and their pundits and college football playoff discourse has been kind of disrespecting the Big
Yeah,
Ten and
yeah,
especially Penn State. But like, go put the tape on, man. Like that was a good Minnesota team. They were damn near 8-2 going into the game.
Yeah.
Um, things happen. They're a good team. They got a lot of talent. Especially, I was impressed with the way Max Brosmer played. Like he was getting the ball out quick and
yeah, yeah.
accurately. I mean, Abdul and Denai were bearing down on him like
Right.
all day, and he really handled it well. Good running backs. That receiver
Yeah.
Jackson,
Very good.
really good player. Like it's a good team. It's a good team, and you're right. It's a feather in James Franklin's cap. And I think the USC game is much in the same way. Like I think I like the way you said like this was Minnesota's championship because at that point in time, the Penn State game was for USC too.
Yeah.
They started the year in the top 25, had 2 losses.
Yep.
You lose that one, your season's pretty much done.
Yep.
If you win that
It
one,
was. And it was.
it was. But if you win that one against Penn State, like
Yeah.
you still got a chance to make some noise. And so Penn State's gotten, and this is like a thing that I think exists like on a year-to-year basis because of what Penn State has done in the Big Ten over James Franklin's tenure is that like being that next step between Ohio State and Michigan and the rest of the conference, like teams are always going to give Penn State their best shot because they know it's the most gettable one. And James
Yeah.
Franklin has always handled it well, especially in the past few years. This year did it great against 2 tough teams. A lot of credit to Tom Allen in the defense. lot of credit to Drew Aller and the way he bounced back.
Yeah.
On the couple of special teams plays, Bob, just to kind of rehash it, I don't understand what got into Caleb Artis's head on the PAT,
Yeah.
because that's like, I mean, that's just like really basic. You don't take the outside guy no matter what. He unfortunately for him found his way to the bench on the next PAT.
Yeah.
But the Riley Thompson punt, I know James Franklin said it wasn't a scheme issue. He did kind of just shank it, and it ended up getting the player's hand. But like, I don't really like the rugby style run up when you're in your own end zone to begin with. It just too much to worry about. But all in all, it was a great win.
Yeah.
This team's in great position. They deserve flowers for what they've done this year. Played Ohio State to 7 points. As long as they avoid an absolute disaster this weekend, I'm really excited to see how things play out down the stretch.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the Blue White Breakdown. We're previewing. Believe it. We just talked for like 111 minutes about Minnesota, but that was a game that you can't talk enough about. And
that's right.
And I wanted to get your thoughts. And when you were talking about the special teams plays, I think what we're really saying is we're not calling them flukes, but they are correctable. All right. Yes. These are easily correctable issues. And also the Tyler Warren punt that only went 16 yards is another one that I think is pretty easily fixable. You don't have to try and kick it out of bounds. You just got to kick it down. Then once, as James said, like there's not really anyone super deep. You just got to put it in the air in the middle of the field and let it roll. So that's another one.
That sequence was big for Drew, getting him frustrated on the sideline, and then James calming him down. So two-way street.
Yeah, we'll turn it to Maryland. We both have some pretty. I think we're not going to have the same score. I know that you've assured me of that, but I wanted to say it's senior day, and I don't want to speculate on the who's. I know we could talk about that, but I just want to get your thoughts because I have some strong opinions. When you think about Penn State getting to 10-1, and with it, they had a shot to be unbeaten. They had a shot against Ohio State, legit shot.
They did.
They couldn't get off the field on defense at the end of the game. They couldn't convert inside the 5, I think, twice. And if they're better in that, it's going to be a hell of a game if they play again. But they're 10-1 in large part because I think their best players have played their best when Penn State has needed them to, and that is not always the case. When seasons are 8-4 or they're 9-3, or you look at some of last year's games against Ohio State and Michigan, where not all of their players delivered the mail in those games. But when you think about this team, that's what I think about, especially in the road games. They've really gotten most of their A-list players have played their A games, and I think they're to be commended for that. But for me, when I think about this season, the two players that I'm going to remember the most, and I have room to change my mind. One is Tyler Warren. Obviously, that is maybe the most obvious statement I've ever made on a Blue White Breakdown podcast. The other one is Jalen Reed. I wrote about it after the Minnesota game. If you look at his best games this year and his signature plays, they have come when Penn State has needed him the most. He is a lot to me. He's a lot like Tyler Warren is to the offense. I really think, especially the way that he's played after Kevin Winston was lost, I think that guy has had an incredible season, and I just appreciate how hard he's played and how much he's been on the field like a coach. He gets people lined up. I think the whole team respects him. He's made so many plays. Those two guys, though, I think right now, those are the two guys I'm going to remember most. I know they're both eligible. I think they might have a COVID year. They might not, but they're both NFL players. And I think I can't say enough about how they played this year in crunch time when the game was still up and hanging in the balance. I don't know. I was curious. Who are you really going to remember? I think going into the Maryland game.
Yeah, that's a great question, Bob. On the topic of Tyler Warren and Jalen Reed, Reed cannot come back
Okay.
unless some new rule has been enacted that I don't know of, because he was a freshman
Oh, that's
in
right. He didn't have the COVID
2021,
year. Didn't have the COVID year, right?
burned
Got
his red shirt, didn't have the COVID year, so
it. Good
he's
looking out.
done after
Good
this
looking out.
year. Warren, he came in 2020, but I think he redshirted that year. So I'm pretty sure if he really wanted it, he could come back. Uh, but like,
No, don't
dude's not
do it.
doing that.
Yeah.
Let's just shut that down here. The players I will remember, yeah, I mean Warren is what he is. I would say Abdul is going
Yeah.
to be the guy who I really
Yeah.
look at. And again,
Sure.
that might be an obvious one. I saw somebody on Twitter mention something about Abdul potentially having a Heisman case like Tyler Warren. That's not true. He doesn't have a
He's
Heisman
the
case.
guy that Johnny and I were talking about that. He's a guy that when they vote for these things, they keep like a list of everyone getting votes, and like they have
Yeah.
I think they carry it out to like the top 10 or top 12. It wouldn't stun me if Abdul got a couple of third place votes, because it's a very, very people have their opinions, right? And people will, but you're right. He is not. He is not. He's going to be a first round pick, but he is
Yes.
not. I don't think they make you look at the contenders, and it's largely an offensive award, and
Yep.
he's had a super season. But yeah, that's just not really in the cards for Abdul. I get what you're saying.
Yeah. I think the thing with him though that sticks out to me so much is thinking back to his first couple games. Like the dude didn't have a sack in his first two games. He was jumping off sides. He looked lost in the run game,
Yeah.
and then in the it's like he just flipped a switch. Like in the blink of an eye, he turned into an All American at defensive end. Like we knew he could have been an All American linebacker if he played there this year, but
Hmm.
he has just been so good and like continually getting better
Yeah.
at that spot. Like I know it's an obvious
Yeah.
thing to call him out and say he's a guy I'm going to remember, but like genuinely, I think what he's done has been underappreciated because of what he looked like when he first started at that spot. Like
Hmm.
he's a terror. He is terrorizing opposing quarterbacks this season. He is in the backfield on every play. It's just in the thing that you also don't consider with him, he's still playing middle linebacker on some third downs.
Yeah.
He's dropping into coverage every now and then. He is a versatile player. He'll get probably a top 10 pick for a good reason.
Yeah.
I've seen some people try and argue that he's better than Micah Parsons. Hard to tell
Yeah.
because we never got that third year of Micah at Penn State.
Yeah.
But they are both really good players. Abdul has been quite a story, and I mean, again, it's obvious, but like the story of this season is Drew Aller's development. The guy was good last year. Like
Mhm.
if you want to say he wasn't, that's fine. That's your opinion. But he was good last year. He was. He had a bad offensive coordinator and no receiver help around him, but he didn't turn the ball over. He made some wow throws here and there. Yeah, he had some issues. He had his lumps, but he was a 19-year-old kid starting against really good competition.
Yeah.
Like give him chops for what he did. And this year it's just been a whole nother level. Obviously, not scoring a touchdown against Ohio State is going to hurt his resume. But you look at the comebacks against Minnesota, against USC, he was poised. He's clearly in control of this offense, as we keep hearing. The mobility is a huge thing for both
Mhm.
Penn State and his NFL draft stock. Like, you really can't say enough about where he's come this year. Those two guys,
Mhm.
Abdul and Drew, I think are part of the story of the season because of how much they've just continually gotten better in their
Yeah.
third years here.
Yeah. Before we get to our picks, our Penn State Maryland picks on the Blue White Breakdown, I wanted to just mention two other players that really, for different reasons, but I think I'm going to remember them not quite to the level what I mentioned with Tyler and Jalen. One is Nick Dawkins at center,
Yeah.
coming in first year, bided his time behind a couple of NFL centers in Hunter Norzad and Juice Scruggs.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, good teammate, uh, Coaches rave about him. Physical player. I remember talking to Phil Troutline at the start of the season about Nick, and he said, he had a talk with him and said, look, it's looking like you're going to be the guy for us at center. I'm paraphrasing. He said, but if you really, really, really want to be all that you can be as a center, you need to drop about 20 to 25 pounds because of the movement skills. And we're going to ask you to do some things mobility wise, and you could be a little lighter. And he said, Nick did it. And I think that speaks to his commitment. And I think he played very well. I'm going to remember him. And also, I wanted to give a little shout out to the transfer corner from Georgia, AJ Harris. I think he has been just really, really, really a good fit for this secondary. I think, Jalen Kimber as well. But if they don't have those two corners this year, I don't know. I don't think that they're probably not 10-1.
No.
It was a good corner room without them coming in, but they had lost some good players. And for Penn State hit on both those kids, but AJ Harris, man, I don't think we've seen the best of him, but the current AJ Harris is pretty good. I just wanted to single him out. I think he's not only in coverage, but I saw some plays, maybe not every play, but there were some games where he was not afraid to show up and run support. I wanted to mention those two guys as well.
Yeah, AJ is surprisingly physical for being kind of a smaller guy on the outside. Bob, if we're gonna do this, like in previewing senior day, there are other guys who I think deserve a shout out too. Like Devon J. Thomas, I think is a guy who is pretty overlooked in the fact that his on-field numbers through his 6 years have never been eye-popping. Like he's not a guy who you even watch a game and say, wow, he's really dominating right now. He's just never been that guy. But if you look at the arc of his career, he played a lot early on when they lost PJ Mustipher in 21 to that season-ending injury. And Devon did a respectable job. He was young. He was a little undersized. And that guy he kept getting better. He followed the program-wide initiative of putting on weight, especially on the D-line. He got bigger. And he is as mature a football player as I've ever seen. Like he is always the guy who you hear about in the locker room, whether it's at a halftime deficit, whether it's after the Ohio State loss. No matter what the situation is, if you ask players and coaches who stepped up, who said words of encouragement, whatever, during this game, he is always the one who shows up. Like he's a great speaker, great with the media. Really can't say enough good things about him. And he's turned himself into a more than serviceable defensive tackle up front. And then Kobe King, another senior.
Yeah, good one.
Done a good job at the middle linebacker spot.
Yep.
Doing the quarterbacking with the in-helmet communication new this year. He had to see his twin brother, who he'd been with forever, go off to the NFL this year, and has played some of his best football without him. He's another guy who's improved throughout his career a ton. I said it at the top of the podcast, but there are a lot of really deserving guys for this senior day. Yeah. I think when we came into the season, this was a group where we were like, well, where's their leadership going to come from? Like they don't necessarily have those guys this year because they lost a lot of them last year, but we definitely found them. Like they've got them. Like Drew turned into one of those guys, Kobe, Devon, Jalen Reed for sure. Tyler Warren in a little bit of a different way because he's not very vocal, but they found him, and this turned into a really, really fun team, a team full of good guys who are easy to talk to, great in media, a team that's easy to root for if you're a fan.
Well said, Max. I agree with all of that, especially the leadership part, and we're going to get to our picks here, but I'll be interested because James referenced it, and I think you know it, but Drew is starting now to make strides as a leader in terms of being more fiery, and that is something that James wants to encourage, not discourage, because if you're going to lead the offense, I'll put it as nicely as I can. If you're going to lead the offense through some tough times, you can't be afraid to be a jerk sometimes and get in
Right.
people's faces. And that's if you look at some of the Penn State quarterbacks that have come before him that have been good,
Mm-hmm.
that has shown up. Trace McSorley would do that. Michael Robinson would do that on the '05 team. It is a characteristic that if it's channeled in the right way, your teammates respect you for it. I think James was alluding to that. I think it was on Monday. He wants to see more of it, but that's one
Mm-hmm.
thing I think Penn State fans should keep an eye on. Not only maybe against Maryland, maybe in December, and
Yeah.
we'll leave that right there. But
Mm-hmm.
Max, this is our favorite time of the preview prediction podcast. We
Yeah.
give our picks. We try and stay out of each other's way in terms of not having the exact same pick. I'll defer to you. You kind of teased it off the air that there was no chance we were going to have the same pick, and you have I guess you have a pretty interesting number. So let's hear it.
Yeah, I mean, it would be genuinely hilarious if we ended up with the same pick after I said that. But, you know, Maryland has only beaten Penn State twice in James Franklin's tenure. Once was in 2020 when it really doesn't count. And the other time was in 2014 in Franklin's first year.
The Stephon Diggs handshake game.
That's right. And in every win for Penn State, Nittany Lions have scored at least 30 points. They've gone over 53 different times. And this Maryland team is giving up about 30 points a game right now to some not awesome offensive competition.
Yeah.
The over-under is set at 50.5 based on what I saw. My prediction is Penn State covers it on their own. So that's my bold take for the day. My score, I'll give it to you fast because this Maryland team just isn't good. I'm going 52-17. I will give the Terps some credit on the offensive side of the ball. They've got a couple playmakers.
Yeah, they do.
But the defense is just not great. Penn State's offense has been cruising. I'm giving them, especially when James Franklin clearly has disdain for Maryland. I'm giving them 50 plus.
Yeah, I texted you. He mentioned. I don't know why I find this funny, but I just have every once in a while. But we're listening to him, and he was going through Maryland. At one point he said head coach in waiting there, and I'm like, okay. I guess technically he was the head coach in waiting, but I guess it never really came to fruition. So I just thought it was funny. But anyway, when you say disdain, that's what goes through my mind about, I was supposed to be, I think, the head coach there, but I wasn't. So now you're going to get it. So I like the way you roll on this pick. I do think this is a team, late in the year trying to play at Beaver Stadium in the cold, and you're not into the game against a Penn State team that is into the game, like Michigan State in 2016, when Penn State had to win that game to get to the Big Ten title game. And I think Michigan State got up a little bit early, and then they got rolled. And I do mean rolled. It's happened before a couple of times. I think that's the scenario that I am anticipating. I took it easy on Maryland. I said 38-10. I do think Penn State will cover the number. And I'm just really curious to see at the first sign of trouble for Maryland, how are they going to react? Penn State, they could be complete opposites. Penn State reacted tremendously to trouble in every game, except for obviously the Ohio State loss. And they still fought. They fought them to the end. They just couldn't get enough done on offense, and that was the story really of that game. But 38-10 Penn State, and I do think that once Penn State does get up, and I think they will, I think they're going to solve their third down woes. I just think you might see the Terps go very, very quietly.
Yep, I'm with you. It's just like this team is not good. They're not fighting for a bowl berth. They're 4-7. Don't have only have the one conference win, like you said. And really, when you look at their actual wins, against Villanova, UConn, and Virginia, who are all bad. It's just like, this is not a good Maryland team. Like, they do have some playmakers on offense. Ty Felton is a good receiver. Roman Hemby's been there for a while. He's a pretty solid back.
Yeah.
Billy Edwards is going to sling it, like, for better or worse. He has thrown 9 interceptions, but he's going to sling it. And, Penn State, I don't know. I've been wrong before, but I don't see this being contested at all. The 50 points might be it might be a little bold, but I'm
really
having fun
if you
with.
consider the history of the game. It's really not. If the game was in Maryland, I would say you nailed it, because that's
That's true.
That's really when they've done their finest woodshedding.
That's true.
Terps has been down there, and I think you're right. I think if James gets a chance, he's just gonna. I also think he's still probably mad about the 2014 game when they kind of were very disrespectful in his first year, and I think all of it adds up. But yeah, I see it the way you see it, and if you hit your 50-plus point call, I'll tip my cap to you, Max.
There we go. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Should be a good day to celebrate some worthy Penn State seniors, and shouldn't be a close game.
You got it, Max. Everyone, happy Thanksgiving. Max, I will see you in a couple of days. Looking forward to it.
That's right.